Welcome to the November 9th UDL Implementation Trials Mentors User Group Network meeting. The agenda is linked in the UDL Forward Community Trials Mentor User Group.
All right, well, we're going to get started right away so that we have plenty of time to give you that task time and time to work on planning for your team. You'll notice that in our opening, our first thing that we're going to ask folks to do is to go into the UDL Forward community and share what you have experienced with the Mentor Toolkit. We want to get the word out that this is a tool that's available to anybody in our state, anybody that's interested in UDL and UDL implementation. So if you would please post something about how the toolkit has helped you, or questions that you might still have about the toolkit, or the trials process itself and your experience with your team, or your team's experience with the trials process itself. And this is on the Forward community page, not in our user group. So this is shared widely across all of the, I think we have 600 and some members now. So let's just take a look at how many people are going to see your post. We have 791 members on the UDL Forward community now. That's awesome. We're getting close to that 1K. Right. So as everybody is crafting their post for the UDL Forward community, the other thing that is part of our housekeeping here is to sign in on the sign-in sheet. So after you're finished with your Forward community shout out, go ahead and add your name. You don't have to add your email if you attended the October meeting and put your email there. We just want to make sure that everybody has a way to connect with each other outside of these meetings, and in addition to the feed that we have on our mentor group page.
All right, so thank you everyone for the shout outs. We know that, you know, everybody is on this journey, and everybody on the journey is probably traveling at a different pace. So we wanted to get a great idea of where each of you are through an activity that is going to lead us to a crowdsourced check-in. So if you click on the headwinds, tailwinds, what you'll see is a check-in. So you can put your district and mentor name here and give us a brief description. Where are you in the trials process? Have you just put your team together? Have you just completed your roadmap? Have you done your baseline data collection? What are your headwinds? What are the things that are, you know, really creating some friction for you? What are the tailwinds? What's giving you momentum and helping you move through this process? And then where are you going next? What are your next steps? We're hoping that by getting a picture of where each of your teams are, that we can do some differentiation for you as mentors, but also have some common idea exchange and problem solvings around, you know, any of those headwinds that seem to be common amongst like your experiences and your teams. So we'll give you 5 minutes to go ahead and tell us about your journey so far in the trials process.
Okay, somebody asked in the chat to clarify headwinds, tailwinds. So as the picture shows, headwinds are anything that prevents you from moving forward at a regular pace. So they're things that just get in the way, causing friction for the process for you. And tailwinds, oftentimes we're not even aware of what our tailwinds are, that they are accelerators for our work in some way. And we want to take this moment to bring awareness to the fact that there may be things in the organization, things in how you are working, things in the people that you're working with that's really giving you momentum that you might not be, intentionally conscious of, and bringing those things forward with as much detail as possible can help other people engineer in those supports or those system pieces or the people pieces that you're experiencing that's really giving you the kind of boost in the progress that you maybe not aware of, but coming to a realization, it could be like, yep, that's actually moving us forward.
Think about riding a bike. When you're riding against the wind, you have to pedal harder. And when the wind is kind of at your back, it's helping you actually pick up pace. So that's the headwind, tailwind concept.
All right, it looks like folks are getting some really good ideas around where they're at, the headwinds that they're experiencing, the tailwinds, and their next steps. So let's take some time to take a look at them and share our wisdom with each other to be able to solve some problems. I'm going to share my screen here again. Are you seeing the?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So what we'd like to do is to just share the headwinds and problem solve the tailwinds. And I think we can just march down the road. Does that make sense? Or should we volunteers over voluntold?
We can march right down the road if you would like.
All right. So CISA 8, you're first. I see that there's a headwind of a few staff have dropped out due to other commitments. How many folks with a hands up? Go ahead and use the emojis on your screen if you want to. How many people have experienced some staff moving away from the work because of other commitments? Okay. I can see a couple of head nods, but yep, another hand.
Another hand.
Yep. So that has been a headwind that we've faced also in the work that we've done with districts as a together work. But I've also experienced that when I worked with districts when we were first starting out. So our flexibility is a way that we can help those districts that we're working with feel like it's if how they start out isn't how they continue, that they have to drop out. So just keeping the ball rolling, even when there's some changes within that cohort of folks that are starting out, that's helpful.
Yeah, and Joe, if you remember, one of our teams started as a larger team, and we ended up going through the process with 2 team members.
Yep.
So, we started with hopes of somewhere between, 5 and 7 team members.
Mhm.
And we ended up going through the process with 2 team members. And, they still reported to us throughout the process that they were getting a lot of value from doing the work and having the collaborative dialogue and having the data to really look at how their students were responding to those UDL practices in the classroom. So sometimes, being able to adjust, and if you still have a few folks at the table, keep moving on with them is a good value to those that feel they have the ability to participate.
So Terry, can you share how has that changed the dynamics with the groups that are still committed to the work within the district?
It hasn't impacted them greatly. They are still committed. It's a snap, it's a snafu along the way. So they're very flexible. They're very helpful with each other, with a lot of good conversations. And so, perhaps the conversations that they're having aren't with the original people that they were talking to, but they are still continuing to work through the work. And they're dedicated. So it just works. Part of UDL is flexible. And so if we can't model that and understand that that's going to be a part of the work that we're going to be engaging in, then, we're not really leveraging all the aspects of UDL that can be a benefit to our students either.
Thanks. That's well stated. Thank you. All right. Okay. South Middle in Eau Claire. There's some resistance to collaboration and planning with a few colleagues, and the time commitment for teachers already being stretched, collecting and inputting data. So, so can you share with us how you might have been working to get past that resistance, or what system pieces are allowing for that time for teachers to put their data in?
Well, we do have some time structures. I think it's part of the process is learning and helping staff learn about my impact, which is just taking longer than we anticipated, just the logistics of that. We have some new and veteran teachers who, like, there is dedicated collaboration planning time. Just some of that conversation among them isn't always collaborative. So I would say our role then is to move to that facilitator and try to move that conversation to collaborative versus I'm just doing my thing. Kind of. So I feel like we know the structures and where we're heading. These are just kind of the things that we're encountering currently with we have a lot of new staff. So the time commitment just seems like we don't have time to get through what we need to get through in the time that we are allotted. So we are adjusting and working through that.
Well, the adjustment piece, that's going to be, it's going to be constant, right? The adjustment piece, because all of the different pressures that are on a district, and time and attention are the two most precious resources that are always in short supply. So yeah, the adjustment piece. And it sounds like those new staff are really willing participants and eager. So that's really exciting. That's going to be helpful in moving those resistors along, as long as they have a partner in that, right?
Right.
That's great. All right. CISA 9. Looks like you're working on connecting the dots with a lot of the initiatives rolling in the state. That's been a hard one for a lot of folks. So what have you been doing to try to connect things together?
We are working with leaders. We're starting a leaders network next week. It's a 3-day series, just thinking about what are some of the foundational pieces that you need in order to develop a system and structures to support UDL in a sustainable way at a district level. So hopefully that'll provide us an opportunity to bring in some of the other work that's happening across the state and have some discussion around how UDL can be implemented and used as a foundational framework for all of that. So that's one way that we're hopeful that we can start to connect the dots and also help people build systems that support the work.
What other initiatives are you connecting for those of the folks in our group here to get together? Which initiatives are you connecting to UDL
As
specifically?
we get into the curriculum work portion, and we talk about having goals, having clearly defined targets, we'll probably get into a little bit of assessment. There's some assessment work happening across the state. So districts that are engaging in that, if they're there, hopefully we can connect those dots for them, thinking about educator effectiveness as well. Are we using that as a tool for educators to really self-reflect around goals that all align to that bigger mission or to the UDL work? Mia, am I missing anything? I know you're on here too.
I just want to say I get to work with Carrie Jo every day. So yay.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I didn't just cough in everybody's ear. I've been a little under the weather this week. So if my voice just, I'm all good. I'm starting to feel better, but sorry, I think I might have just.
The other piece that we're looking at is within the EMLSS work too, because UDL is literally called out within that work, helping district leaders begin to see that connection, because I don't know that it will be explicitly called out for them in a way that will help them think about like UDL as the structure. So we're still trying to figure out like how to help people see that connection, but we're starting, with bringing leaders together first and foremost.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about also the tailwind that you're feeling about smaller districts and singletons can see it a way to tweak PLCs?
So two districts that we're working with, Rib Lake is one of the smallest districts in our region, along with Edgar.
Mm.
They literally have departments of one, but bringing them together around engagement and helping them talk through, some of the design thinking that needs to happen. It shifts from these content specific conversations to let's really look at engagement in a different way. So that's been interesting. And for Rib Lake, they've been struggling a bit with like, how do they make the PLC structure effective in their work and not feeling forced and trying to bring them together. So again, like shifting from content to thinking about engagement has really kind of like begun to open up some options for them. So.
Thanks, Mia. Thanks for sharing that. And we've seen that across different schools too in CISA 8, that small rural districts, and I imagine it's, there's instances where larger districts also have this same situation where there's not the kind of data around a typical PLC focus. And these implementation trials, whether it's UDL based or other practices based, can really be a way to center students and their learning process in that PLC instead of in addition to the delivery piece, but it's centered on that design for impact. All right, CISA 10. Sounds like you're having some struggles with district leadership, not having a firm understanding of the UDL work. What is that? How does that manifest itself? And what struggles does that propose for you?
So we're working on getting into a few districts, and I think that the leadership of those districts doesn't understand the integration and connection between all the other things that they're working on, because they just don't have they just don't understand it. It's something that I think can be very much integrated into what they're doing. PLCs, SLOs, EE, multi-level systems of support, but they don't like see the connection. They think that it's kind of just us at CISA coming to them with one more thing to do. And so I think we need some leadership, like some training with our leadership around what the whole purpose of UDL is and how to for them to roll it out to their staff. So to make sure that they can get the right staff who want to do it and kind of act as the first people in their district, and then have it be kind of both a grassroots ground up as well as a top down kind of implementation sandwich is kind of what I like to think of it as, to try and get those people who maybe aren't too interested in making changes. If you can do a top down and a bottom up situation, you can get complete, buy-in. So that's really what we're working on. And I'll be really honest, is that as a new CISA consultant, having those relationships and trust situations with districts, as I'm trying to convince them of these things, has been a barrier for me, and I'm working on it. But that's also something that I didn't put in the headwinds, but like having those relationships with districts for them to trust me and trust what I'm saying is also kind of for our team, the whole team that we have at CISA 10 working on this is a little bit of a barrier.
Yeah, it's, we think about all of these technical aspects of implementing something, but the adaptive piece of the relationships is fundamental for the success of any implementation.
What, Wendy, I put in the chat a link to an introduction to UDL slideshow that is part of the toolkit. That might be a nice starting point with some of the district leaders. I know Beth also has a wonderful introduction to UDL presentation session that she has done with one of our teams in the past. Beth, I don't know if you'd be willing to share that, but any resources that we could share as a team, maybe how to introduce UDL along with the trials process, might prove beneficial for not only building some awareness and understanding, but also connecting some of those initiatives in a more visual representation where people can see how they're, interacting with one another.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Any help is much appreciated.
Beth, if you're willing to share, would you make a post in the mentor community, the network?
Of course. Yeah. I was just going to say, where do we want to put that stuff? Because I'm always tweaking it just so everybody knows, though. So what you saw, when was that? Like a year and a half. So anyway, I will put, some resources. And if I could just comment for a second, I think one of the things that I'm seeing with this, and Wendy, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I'm feeling like if there isn't a base of a really good understanding of UDL. So let's say, for example, a district decides to, hey, yeah, we're in, but they really don't know what they're in for, except for they know that it's called UDL Implementation Trials. And what is UDL? I feel like we need to spend a lot of time front loading before we even get into trials. So when I look at that, a roadmap, I would say like the first quarter would be all learning, like what is UDL? If we don't, I'm so fortunate because I'm working with a school who has had the UDL grant for years, like 10 years, like whenever it started. So for me, I've been working with them for UDL. Now this is our 3rd year. So for them, they know exactly what UDL is, but now let's see their impact, right? So now let's really measure their impact of using those UDL strategies. So this is just something I've been thinking about, something that maybe we can talk about for future, like how do we get districts on board first about UDL and then get into the trials, even if it's 2nd semester. I don't know. Thoughts on that, you guys? What do you think?
Beth, can I just interrupt, because I'm who Beth is working with, and Beth is right. Our school has been doing UDL activities and trainings and stuff for years. So everybody is super familiar with it. We all feel like it's a part of how we just operate at school. So there's plenty of buy-in. Nobody, we're not fighting that. However, it's easy. We have a new team member this year in 5th grade who has come to us with zero knowledge of UDL. And not that she's against it, just that we are so unaware of all the things that we do that sometimes she is doing something and we're all like, oh my, okay, that's not UDL. And it's something we haven't given a thought to. And yes, as I'm going along here, I'm like, oh, she needs a lot more background knowledge on why we're choosing some of these things. So it has turned out to be something that knowledge base or a familiarity. I don't know how you could, she's kind of struggling in the things that we're doing because she doesn't understand any of it or why we're doing it. And again, not that she's against it, just that she's not understanding things. So, Wendy, when you were talking about schools and, not knowing how it fits, that I would say that's absolutely critical because for us, and as a 5th grade classroom teacher, like all of this makes sense to me. It's all like nobody has to convince me. We can collaborate. None of those things are barriers because we bring a huge knowledge base of that. So yeah, sorry, Beth, I didn't want to take your spotlight, but I think it's absolutely critical.
I think that is great. And actually today, because I meet with Sun Prairie this afternoon, it's more of talking about now what are some of those strategies, which then we'll get into more of the practice. So she'll see some of that, but you're right. Like, how do we onboard new people too?
And she's an absolutely fabulous teacher. And she's, it's just that there's so many things that we are doing as teachers that we've been doing for so long, we don't even realize, what we're doing. And sometimes in her way of doing things is just so very different. And again, it's not a judgment, just that I'm like, oh, that's not UDL or and you don't realize after doing it for so long how it just is ingrained with your way of thinking, and that if you don't have that way of thinking, that absolutely could be a barrier. So
well, I wrote down onboarding new hires as another feature of our toolkit that could be added, not necessarily as a big part of it, but more importantly, calling it out. Like, consider this, that you will have to onboard new people, because what you said, Alicia, it's so true that as we become experts, all of that novice thinking becomes unavailable to us, right? And it's so hard to get back to, how did we think about that when we were first starting to integrate that new information into our current paradigm or our current thinking, and that it becomes invisible to somebody else. Then it becomes invisible to ourselves, and it's hard to make it visible for anybody else. So CISA 10, can you talk about the cross-department collaboration between school improvement and special education? Is that in your CISA, or is that happening within the district that you're serving?
Because of some changes in our staff, our UDL support is being spread across multiple consultants in our organization. So we're all kind of taking different pieces, and of the team, there are 2 of us from learning services and school improvement and 2 people from the special ed department. So we're working together as a team of 4 to make those connections. I was not a special ed teacher. So like understanding their perspective and them understanding, like, I taught high school science. So I'm like on a very different, wavelength. Understanding our connections and has been, I feel, a a benefit for us because we're looking at it really from a universal tier 1 type lens where it's all kids. This isn't an intervention, it's all kids all the time, and that's been really helpful. And we feel it's helped our organization CESA 10 become stronger in this regard, just because we have been in the past so siloed, special education, regular education, that I think that the UDL principles lend nicely to the crossing over of departments for us, but I think also for schools, which is something we're trying to get the schools to understand as well.
That's such a good point, Wendy, because it's no wonder our students feel like they either belong in one camp or another when the adults in the system is set up so that we feel like we're either in one camp or the other, right? So designing in systems to create that explicit connection will help that universal truly become universal. Very good point. Thank you for calling that out. All right, Sheboygan Falls, Gina, what are you experiencing?
Yeah, so Gina, I will say, reached out to me via our chat in the UDL Forward community. So thank you, Gina. If you notice on the agenda, I did capture those questions that you had so that we were sure to discuss them, but I also see you've listed them here. So I will let you take it away with your questions, but thank you so much for bringing them to the conversation today.
Absolutely. We had a really productive day with our grant team. We're working with a 6th grade team. We were able to really lay out what our plan looks like. We have timelines set up. One of the questions we had as we were going through the timeline and then the pieces that we'll be using is in looking at the rubrics and just understanding if there's some flexibility, like with some of the descriptors. And our main thinking in that is so that it matches the curriculum and what our school is using. And then the same piece with the engagement rubric, if any of those pieces, the criteria descriptors, if those would be flexible as well. So that was a question that came out of our work together with our team.
So I would say for sure the academic rubric, the descriptors as well as the criteria are absolutely at your discretion. So you can choose to make those whatever makes sense for the students that are in front of teachers. The engagement criteria, so this is a place where we don't have the kind of state level oversight that we had in the past. So I'm going to be a little wishy-washy here because maybe as a group here, I don't want to overstep my authority to make a decision here, but I think it's good for us to open up a discussion right now. In the past, those engagement criteria could not be adjusted. That the previous DPI grant administrator wanted those criteria to be the same for every one of the teams that was doing the implementation trials. I have a different opinion about that. So I'm interested to hear the pros and cons of adjusting those engagement criteria descriptors across this group and the data that might result from those changes. Kind of opinions do people have about that?
And I think one other clarifying point just to kind of throw out there, the my impact, if you're using the my impact, though that criteria for the engagement criteria is based on what the department wanted us to use previously, correct?
Right, but they are you can change them, they're editable.
Absolutely. But just so that everybody's aware, both the data collector tool and my impact has been calibrated, if you will, or set up with the engagement criteria that Joe and I were required to use.
Right.
So I'd like to weigh in on this conversation. I've had a lot of conversations with different people that I've worked with in the districts about the engagement criteria. And I think that it comes down to, first of all, identifying what do teachers believe true engagement looks like within their classrooms and within their schools. And so when we've had those discussions with the groups that I've worked with, it's really come back around to these 4 criteria most of the time.
Because they're observable.
Because they're observable, and that's just it. It's not that engagement can't look other ways or can't be other things, but in order to observe it, you have to have something you can, collect, see, engage with. But I've also encouraged them to think more broadly about the statement. So when it says things like works with others, working with others can look very different for some students. Some students working with one other person is working with others. It's not always this small group or whatever it is that they set up. To think about the students themselves and what that looks like within the realm of how the student currently engages. And so when we've had those conversations, that's been a little bit more helpful for them to actually then see, okay, now I can do this because I've been looking that it has to be small groups. And really, when this particular student is working with a partner, that's fine. That's fine. So it's come down to how they're defining it as well.
Yeah. Joe, Beth has an excellent question that she posed in the chat. Just kind of dating back to how those engagement criteria were chosen. And were they chosen because of the characteristics or the traits with an expert learner?
They were not based on the characteristics of an expert learner. They were based on some research articles that both Jane and I did some studying and tried to identify which of the criteria, the engagement criteria that were in research articles, were most broadly culturally appropriate. So there are a lot of other engagement criteria that are in research articles that probably are less applicable to multiple cultures. So we tried to pick out the ones that, based on Jane's work with all of the folks at DPI that have equity at the center, and I've done some equity work, but nothing near what she had done, were most accessible to a broad group of folks, a more diverse group of folks. So
if I could interject quickly here,
yes,
just my thoughts on this. We, at Sheboygan Falls, we've been doing the grant trials for a long time, and most of the criteria in the engagement rubric work out pretty well. The one that sometimes gets a little wonky in the process, I know this from experience, is the participates in discussions. There are certain classes where we've done grant work. I'm thinking of one that we did a year ago in a personal fitness class. We were doing something non-traditional where you had highly engaged students, doing all kinds of different things that would demonstrate engagement. But in the realm of that class, discussions with another person weren't always a key factor in showing their engagement. And so when we were assessing their engagement in those trials, we felt bad for almost like marking that student down, saying, well, they're not engaged, when every other piece of evidence showed us they were engaged at a high level. And that at that point in the process, they didn't need to have conversations with other people because they were an active expert learner. They were accessing resources. They were doing all these things. Not to say that at some point in the process earlier on, before that particular trial, they might have had a conversation with someone, but at the time of that trial, they could be fully engaged and yet not having a discussion. So that's one of the things that came.
So Mark, what would another descriptor be to replace discussion in a class like you're describing?
In a personal fitness class?
Sure.
Oh, there's a bunch of them. One of them was like in that particular class, it was monitoring their own self progress. So in that class, they were wearing like like a Fitbit kind of thing, and they had different ways to monitor their progress within that class during the trial. So it was almost like feedback not from another individual, but from feedback from their technology in how their progress was. And we did kind of use that in place of it. Like I said, it becomes, sometimes the actual physical discussion becomes a little wonky. You're getting feedback in that case from a device, not necessarily from another person. But my point is, those students could be highly engaged without having a physical discussion with someone else.
Yeah, my wonder is it looked at as participates in discussion or participates in class activities, class, monitoring or your own monitoring? I'm wondering if the participation is more about the interaction of the student with learning.
Well, we certainly can adjust that. I guess Gina's question was more just to the point, can we as we see fit when we have a situation like that? That's really what I think she's trying to ask.
Mm-hmm. So I think so my belief is that it should be able to be adjusted because we all have different situations and different students in front of us. So we all have different populations of students in front of us, and they might have different observable features of their engagement. I think what's key when we change those descriptors, I think the big key is that it has to be part of a discussion, as Terry said, so that we have a common understanding of what we're meaning when we say students are engaged, so that we really suss out whether we're looking at it from an adult point of view and we're looking at compliance, because that's different than engagement and learning. So the discussion around that engagement and learning, and Beth, you made a really good point. Those features of an expert learner are a great place to look for alternative criteria descriptors that can be adjusted. And really what we're focused on in all of our data analysis is, regardless of what those criteria are, we want to move our students from 1s and 2s to 3s and 4s, because we group those 1s and 2s together and we group those 3s and 4s together across all of the criteria, engagement criteria as a set, and then across all of the academic criteria as a set as well. So Gina, to answer your question, I think our grant process has to be as flexible as we're asking our teachers to be in adjusting their practices. So with the caveat that it should be centered on a discussion around true student engagement and not just student compliance. How do you feel about that, Gina?
Thank you. I appreciate that we could have a discussion around it and the flexibility. I think that's exactly what we were hoping for.
Great. That's great.
Can I just come in as a 5th grade teacher doing this? We saw when we talked about this, we were struggling, like, oh my gosh, like we have to do all 4 of these things at one time. And we kind of saw discussion as like communication and response to another person. And it didn't have to be immediate. And so, and it could be written, it could be a video response to something the kids were doing together. So it didn't have to be face-to-face talking in the moment, and it didn't have to be a class discussion. It just meant communication back and forth, either written, oral, video, between at least 2 people. So is that fair? Like once we kind of thought of it that way, we're like, oh, we do this every single day. Is that a fair way of defining it?
Yeah, I that sounds like a good way to define it and have a conversation around it for sure. Because it's going to look different in every class and at every grade level and with every group of students, that's for sure.
Okay, so setting the definition by what works for us is okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I haven't done these in the classroom as a teacher, but is discussion, the word discussion there meant more like feedback, like create and accept and create feedback. Like in any, it can be opened up instead of discussion necessarily, but like a feedback loop of some sort in that word. That was just my kind of take on it.
Yeah, I think so. And Alicia, it sounds like that's kind of how you defined it a little bit too. Yeah, and that is engagement, right? And that goes into the expert learner pieces. So if by definition, you're able to get some more clarity around what you're observing, I think it's important to have that discussion amongst the team members. This process is meant to increase our collective efficacy as much as improve student outcomes and student engagement. So whatever we can do to increase our collective knowledge and our collective impact on our students, that is the right thing to do in this process.
So my one question is, let's say that Sheboygan Falls wants to make some adjustments in the engagement rubric, or any district for that matter that's using My Impact. Are they able to do that by teacher? Or does it have to be the same for the entire group?
It has to be for the whole group. So the rubric, whatever team, and this is the data collector, or this is the My Impact, all of the people that are part of that team, all of the educators that are part of that team have to have a common academic rubric and a common engagement rubric. All right. So, Sun Prairie. Have we, sounds like the time and instruments to gather data has been you had already said that it was taking you a bit longer to bring people on, or maybe that was Eau Claire. Eau Claire said that, a little bit longer to bring folks onto My Impact than they had anticipated. What are you experiencing in Sun Prairie?
I am the person in charge of that, and I have not been on My Impact yet. And I think it's just a matter of time, and our PLCs and our collaborative time together, our plates are so full. And this is the first time that we're doing this. So it's taken us a long time because we don't know the ropes, and we don't know, having discussions like I brought up earlier about, the engagement pieces. What's a discussion? Can we count? You have to post your work, and you have to give feedback to 3 other people or something. Is that a discussion? So we're spending a lot of time talking about things as opposed to just really doing them because it's our first time through. So having Beth Clark come in and get us back on track and be like, no, has been super duper helpful. So I'm the person in charge of all that. And it's just, we just don't have enough time to figure stuff out, and we don't know what we don't know. So having Beth Clark come in and tell us, you already know this, you're right, move on, has helped things a lot. And she's meeting with us this afternoon too. So we're kind of backwards. I think a lot of my questions are going to be answered at 1:45 today when she comes and sees us at school.
Well, let's hope. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I think the nice thing about having the user group network is that what one district is experiencing or the questions you have can benefit all. And, even if someone hasn't happened upon a particular barrier or hiccup, just knowing that it might be out there and how to navigate, or, what are some ideas to work to solve some of those issues is really helpful. I know one of the things with data collection that when Joe and I were working a few years ago with some teams, they actually had interventionist or another instructional coach come in and do the data collection for the teacher while the teacher was teaching, because the idea of it feeling like it was taking time away from instruction was not something that they wanted to kind of keep experiencing. So to mitigate that feeling, having another person be that data collector, observer, and know which criteria to look for in a particular lesson was helpful to that team. So I throw that out there as an idea that might be feasible as you get started with the data collection process. Any other ideas of how to create a more efficient feel to the data collection process?
This might not be helpful. It's a question actually, and I'm wondering, so our second grade team is doing more diagnostic testing, like almost, I don't know if I want to call it diagnostic, but based on phonics and decoding. And so I think that's where they're seeing the heavy lift, whereas when we're working in fifth grade, they're doing more of how do I say it? Like, Lisa, I'm thinking of more a standard that is really, that could be used over and over in their like everyday work.
Yes,
like
I mean, super broad, many ways of interpreting, many ways of, yes, which we picked it because we thought it is overarching. And yeah, we've picked like something that is more about the thinking process, and they've picked like an isolated skill, so like to speak, skills, in comparison. Yes. So like, and so that's we where can, you know, like the isolated skill, you can say, yes, we have it, or no, we don't. And for us, no matter, even if for finding theme, you can always find a more sophisticated way to do it. So it's never ending for us versus for them decoding. Like once you decode whatever their list is, or the phonics, once you've learned those specific things, and I teach fifth grade, so I have no knowledge or expertise in decoding or phonics, but they're two different. We're talking about a thinking process. They're talking about an isolated skill.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking as we talk as a group, and we'll get better and better at this, but choosing that standard, what you're looking for, how it's observable is going to become important as far as the time commitment and the instrument used to measure and observe. So anyway, just a thought out there. This will be interesting this year.
So, and Beth, if you have one of your groups that chose a criteria that's very limited in how long it will, you know, be observable, or if it like kind of cuts out after trial 2, just collect data up to there, and you can collect on trial 3, and they might all be at 4s at that point. But because we have a diverse set of indicator students, you might have, you know, 1 or 2 students that would struggle with that technical skill, even in the most optimal situation. And what we're trying to do is move our ability to impact students from more of that central group of folks to the edges of the curve. So even if the majority of my students have gotten to that 4-level rubric, I might have the 1 or 2 students who still are at that 2 or 1. And what I want to do is focus in on what barriers am I removing, so those folks that have been historically the most difficult to impact, how are we choosing the strategies that will really impact the whole group of our indicator students. Okay.
All right. Excellent dialogue. Thank you so much for the great questions. On to Niagara. So it looks like with Niagara, keeping the motivation and focus on the ultimate goal of implementing UDL while also maintaining other teacher duties and managing, you know, the burnout that teachers can feel when they're doing a lot of good work. So any thoughts on, you know, how you've been addressing that and other ideas that we might be able to share as a group?
It looks like we might have lost our folks from Niagara.
All right. Well, I will say we did talk a little bit about, you know, a lot of connecting of initiatives or connecting of other priorities as a way to have UDL not be a standalone. So that would be one option. Should we move on to Rhinelander?
Yeah, I just want to say that the Niagara District admin being committed to the implementation process, and I know that that's a common theme here with the schools that we're dealing with, but it is essential for the administration to have as much or more commitment to this process as the teachers who are being asked to do the work within the classroom. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then finally, we have Rhinelander. So Jeff, it's so the voluntold over volunteer. Tell us how that is going for you and what have you done to help those voluntolds have a little sense of autonomy there.
So originally, it was geared in a way of how do we make your EE easier, right? How does this process make the things that you have to do easier? And within that, we had movement. The PLC then, as a PLC grows, you know, they have to hit the storming phase before they hit the norming phase. And they really hit a big storm that was separate from the trials. And it was bigger than the trials. And then the trials got woven into some of the conversations of things. And so I really wanted to intentionally separate the two things. If you want to do this and you feel like it's useful for your EE and for your students, then this is student-based conversations. They are not conversations around some of the other things that are floating up. What has been interesting to me in that specific group is I still have my core group of teachers who wanted to start at the beginning of the year. And I have at least one or two more teachers that, because of that being part of the introduction, want to continue it because they see the value. And so there may be one or two that choose to step out. However, the clear majority saw a value. And so there will be more teachers than I expected as an ultimate outcome, right? So that part has been an interesting learning piece for me, as I gave me a chance to reflect on things in a way that I probably wouldn't be asking the teachers the questions that I'm asking them right now. And so those teachers are now able to name, even like if we did a slideshow and everybody was kind of glaring and gazing, right? The way that they took away from those slideshows and those conversations and those pieces and how they took that back to their classroom. Those conversations are happening more efficiently now because of things that have occurred. So in the end, I think it will strengthen those that are doing it. And for those that may be not intentionally, but through other actions, sabotaging or holding back things, have a right to step back and focus on what they feel is best for their students. So
yeah, I think that in the long run, letting folks step back when they're feeling a bit overwhelmed and then letting them step back in when it feels better for them or when there's a greater group doing that, you can get a lot of social capital built up that way, that's for sure.
It is also teaching me a great amount of a group, an entire PLC doing this process versus a smaller group.
All right, great. So let's move on to the next part of our agenda then.
Yeah, really great discussion. Thank you everyone for the fabulous idea exchange and having the spirit of being thought partners with one another. Just touching base again, part 4, stage 3 follow-up. We said if there are any additional questions around baseline data analysis or using the analysis tool, we wanted to at least give an opportunity for those questions to come forward at this time. So again, I know some of you have already gone through that process based on where you are, and some other folks are preparing for that data collection. But I will open up the floor for any questions around the baseline data analysis side of the work.
Has anybody done it yet? I mean, we're doing it this afternoon, so any tips and whatever would be great.
It looks like the Niagara team was done with baseline and on to trial 1, but I'm not sure they're still with us. Rhinelander, Jeff, have you, am I correct that you've gone through that baseline and the analysis and are now starting trial 1?
In 2 out of the 3 groups, yes.
Okay.
We've done the baseline for all of them. We've analyzed the data for all of them. Actually, in one group, we are having that resettling process. In one group, it actually made the teachers dig deeper in what are the learning goals for this class and need to move upward within the district to clarify that so that they feel like they are clear with their students and they are learning goals that are adaptable for the content ability of the students in front of them. So it forced them into that conversation that I think will help the district and students in the future. And then the third group, it has helped us as our district moves forward towards target-based grading, help understand the importance of observables. As we were talking about with behavior, how do we make clear observables within what we're seeing from students so that it helps our grading practices become easier, not more confusing.
Carrie, I saw that you had unmuted yourself to just give a little bit of background on the baseline analysis process and tool.
So I was looking to refresh my memory on what the tool looked like in the toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
And have found that walking the teachers through it the first time rather than just giving it to them and having them do it is super helpful. Also making some connections to the fact that a lot of them that I'm working with use this as part of their SLO. And so as they're looking at these reflective statements, these are the statements that they will use, for that evidence within their SLO, and to think about it that way as well. Just don't think about it as data, period. Think about it as a bigger picture of that student learning objective. And that helps them write better reflective statements that actually says more what they want to say about the data's impact on their students and what they're seeing.
And in Rhinelander, we follow the model of I take care of the behavior, and then we have a conversation afterwards to say, is that what we're seeing? So then that takes that off their plate. It opens up a great conversation, which then leads into the academic conversation. So that's our model.
We also in Rib Lake had really great conversation about like what is engagement, because when you look at the descriptions around initiates tasks, participates in discussions, folks thinking because students weren't throwing chairs across the room, right, that kids were engaged, and being able to think about what engagement really looks like and honing in on those 4 descriptors for the trials was really powerful for people to think through. And then it moves into, well, does my learning target, my goal, actually reflect what we're doing that day? And it becomes lots of questions and fruitful questions and discussion during that time. But definitely thinking about how to reimagine engagement.
Great. Okay.
All right, so we've adjusted some time. The dialogue and the idea exchange is so powerful that we certainly wanted to honor all of the great questions and celebrations that you have. So we're going to take a 10-minute break to give you a little bit of stretch time. And also just to remind folks that if you have not completed your information in the participation log, that's kind of a to-do for your team, as well as if you have yet to complete the project partner agreements, those are something to think about doing at this time. And if you have yet to submit the My Impact subscription and you are planning to use that tool, again, just a reminder, keep that on your to-do list. So we will see you back at about 10:25.
Right. We hope everybody has had an opportunity to go ahead and do some of that housekeeping stuff around our project partner agreements and the project, what do we call that document?
Log, participation
Thank
log.
you, the participation log. Just lost it for a moment there, excuse me. All right, so why don't you go ahead, Michelle, then.
All right, so I will get the share screen. The next part of our session is dedicated to part 5, which is stage 4. And the big idea in that trial 1 planning is the implementation of clear student learning goals. And having those clear goals be the UDL practice that you apply in trial 1, and then collect data on both student academic and engagement, and see if there are any changes with the addition of using those clear learning goals as a UDL practice. We understand that districts and teams can be at various places when it comes to learning goals. Some folks call them learning targets. Some folks call them learning intentions. But what we wanted to do is provide you some resources to support the understanding of writing clear learning goals and how you might be able to support your teams as they use clear learning goals in trial 1. So we have a few great resources that are in the UDL Forward community in the Learning Design Lab portion. Module 1, Expert Learners and Goal Setting. I'm just going to open this quickly. This is a module where you can definitely get some guidance and some great learning around the concept of expert learners and goal setting. Mia, I know that you've been involved in the development of some of the resources. Did you want to do a shout out or any insight into the Learning Design Lab Module 1?
I guess part of the development phase was piloting. So what you're seeing here is several iterations in, and we were able to take feedback from folks as they use the materials. So, and again, any feedback you have, if you're using, these resources is super helpful as well.
Thank you so much. The other resource that we have is getting started with setting goals. Start with setting goals, and that is again in the UDL Forward community. And this is a video around starting with setting goals. Again, you don't have to use any or all of these resources, but we wanted you to have access to them. And then lastly, and I'll turn this over to Joe in a moment, what we decided to do was create a take and make slide deck. So what we mean by that is we have started a slide deck around clear learning goals that you can take, but we would welcome you to add slides and activities that you've used to support the development of clear learning goals with your teams and with your teachers, so that the slide deck can be an ongoing resource and a tool that folks can take and continue adding to over the course of trial 1. So Joe, did you want to give a little shout out to that slide deck and some of the things that our folks can access?
Yeah, sure. So this slide deck is a compilation of multiple presentations that we've used at CISA 8 and is really gleaned from the expertise of all of the consultants that have borrowed this and added into it. I think some of the state design team folks will recognize some of the things that's coming out of our work from many years past. So it's just been kind of a soup that has developed a flavor over time as it has had ingredients added to it and some just time for all of the flavors to melt. So and we're always better together. So as you find that it's lacking something that you think is important for folks to understand the big picture all the way down to the little picture, please add those slides in where you find that they would work for you in your presentation or your support for your teams, because it will definitely make all of us better as well.
You can see the sections. There's a portion on research that supports clear learning goals. Then there's connections to the Danielson framework. And you can, walk through that portion. Again, there's resources here, ideas, ways to engage and motivate through the design of clear learning goals. So if you have something that you've been using and like to add it to the Make and Take slide deck, we welcome that. But again, please feel free to use this as a starting point when working with teams and giving them some practice in designing clear learning goals as they prepare for trial 1.
And do make sure you look into the presenter's notes. Some of the slides have notes about the intent of the slide. Some of the slides also include additional resources. So don't limit yourself to what's on the slide. There's also different things inside the presenter notes. We do know that some teams already have clear learning goals securely in place going into trial 1. So we don't want to have the impression that you have to do clear learning goals for trial 1. If you are working with teams that are well on their way and clear learning goals are a regular part of your practice, you'll notice in the toolkit, we do say that this is the time to really dig into whether it's student self-assessment or another one of the checkpoints on the guidelines. Find that focus for this trial so that teachers can hone in on a particular strategy that they can experiment within their classrooms as a team, and then come back together and discuss how that particular strategy impacted student engagement and academic progress. So we want to give folks a little bit of planning time here, a little resource investigation time in the toolkit, as well as in that slide deck or the other 2 learning module resources. So let's convene back here. We'll bring you back between 10:50 and 10:55 to be able to round out our session today. All right, I'm going to bring everybody back. I know that we left 5 minutes at the end of the checkout, but we need to really emphasize one piece that we're not seeing a lot of participation in. And so leaving that extra time will be helpful for us to get all of our grant deliverables done as well. So anything stick out to you? I saw a couple of slides that have been added to the slide deck. So thank you for your expertise and sharing your wisdom with us by adding that into the slide deck. Please keep adding to it. It will only make us all stronger and better. And we'll post that into our network, mentor network group on the UDL Forward community so that you have continuous access to it. You don't have to worry about coming back to find the meeting agenda. So it is time now for everybody to click into the after session mentor user group survey and take that survey. We use that for our grant deliverables and to understand how we can serve you, all of our mentors, better. So if you would take a moment to do that, please. All right, one more minute for you to continue to fill that out. All right, it looks like people are coming to the submission part of it. All right, a couple of reminders. Our next meeting date is December 13th, at 9 o'clock, and we'll follow a similar kind of pattern that we have set up today, where we do some time where we discuss and problem solve around the barriers that we might be experiencing as a group, and then plan forward for the next stage of our UDL implementation trials. Really important project partner reminders is that we need the trials participation log filled out with the number of students in each of the classes that are being served by teachers on teams. Those numbers are reported for the impact that we have in our grant. So if we want our grant to be able to continue, we need to be able to demonstrate the impact directly on students. So that information is critical for us to continue doing our work. And then another piece is all of the folks that are on your teams need to fill out that UDL Educator Practices and Student Learning Survey. And what that does is it tracks how well our toolkit is serving the needs of educators, how well the UDL Forward community is helping educators connect to UDL, and then helps us understand how these trials are shifting educator mindset and their understanding of UDL. So please have your teams fill out that survey at each of the reflection meetings, the baseline reflection meeting, the trial 1 reflection meeting, the trial 2 reflection meeting, and if you get to a trial 3, the trial 3 reflection meeting. That will be able to help us demonstrate how we are impacting educator practices across the state.
And when we say reflection meeting in the toolkit, that would be during your baseline data analysis meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then finally, you saw on our list of dates that we're meeting together, May is a showcase date, and we want to foreshadow that with the prompt for you to collect artifacts of the work that you're doing with your teams. So some pictures of your teams working together, videos of how your reflection meetings and data analysis meetings go, an example of one of your teacher reflection sheets so we can see how educators are thinking about their practice as it relates to their impact on students. What else do you have to add to that?
I'll share a screen quick, just for a little example. So I just wanted to give you a little example of what this could look like. I had to do kind of a presentation in one of my DPI projects. And so I collected artifacts through just kind of doing a Prezi presentation. You could see the process. I collected pictures of the teams doing the work throughout the process, kind of mapped out our formal work plan, and again, gave some insight into the different tools that we used. So those would be artifacts as well. Pictures of the teams actually doing the work, some of our key findings, tools that we used, etc. So again, we're not telling you that you have to do all of this for your showcase, but what we are saying is, in December, we're going to give you a framework for telling your story. And really that's what we want our May showcase to be, is a storytelling opportunity of what the trials worked and process look like for you. What were some of the outcomes of your work, and where do you see the return on investment? And some of those signature pieces that really bring the learning that you're going through now to life. So with that said, we'll pause for any questions at the end of our time together today, or any final thoughts that you have on our session today.
Mia has her thinking face on. I love that.
Is she playing with her hair?
No, she's not.
Oh,
but
she plays with her hair when she thinks. Yes, she does. She's a, yes.
Oh, Jeff shared, or Wendy, you shared a tool from the UDL conference, the Unruler. Yeah, that's a great idea. And I know Missy has a link to some introductory materials in the UDL Forward community feed about Unruler as well. And that's a great point, Wendy, that timeline with kind of a diary on a timeline. That's great.
Yep.
Great idea.
So again, the showcase side of May is really it's a storytelling opportunity to share your journey. We're gonna give you some ideas and a frame to work within, but we're gonna leave the storytelling to you, the authors of your story. So there's not gonna be one right way to do this. We're just gonna have some, key ideas for all of you to design your stories around. So thanks again for a fabulous session. I so enjoy our time together. We look forward to seeing you in December. Please reach out if you have any questions or need any thought partners between now and then. And we wish you a very happy Thanksgiving as well.
Take care.